Okay, let's jump right in. What do the enemies of a highly controversial leader actually reveal about our society? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating explainer, an imaginary roundtable that brings together some brilliant thinkers to examine one of the most fiercely debated figures of our time. And we're going to do this completely impartially, looking strictly at the underlying systems and ideas at play. This question right here sits at the absolute heart of our discussion today. It forces us to ask something pretty uncomfortable. If a leader faces intense, unprecedented opposition, does that automatically mean they're a unique threat to democracy? Or, and this is the kicker, could it signal that they're just a threat to a very comfortable establishment? Let's use this as our diagnostic tool. Just think about the sheer diversity of this opposition. You have foreign adversaries like China and Iran, somehow on the exact same side as Hollywood celebrities, legacy media, and intelligence agencies. I mean, it's a completely wild mix, right? These groups literally disagree on almost everything else in the world, yet they somehow found absolute common ground in opposing the exact same president. To break this all down impartially, we'll look through 5 distinct lenses: the measure of enemies, why these institutions united, the old arrangement, spiritual and moral tests, and finally, judging the final fruit. Starting with Section 1, the measure of enemies, basically what a list of opponents actually reveals. So here's the core debate. Do powerful enemies prove a leader is doing the right thing, or does it just give us data? On one hand, you have the perspective that institutions are simply terrified of losing their privileges. When groups that got rich during a period of national decline suddenly unite against one guy, you have to ask, what do they fear losing? But actually, scratch that. We have to look at the flip side too. A corrupt institution can still make a totally valid accusation. Widespread opposition might just be a natural reaction to genuine recklessness. So treating your enemies as automatic proof of your own innocence is a pretty dangerous logical trap. Which brings us to Section 2. Why institutions united? Was this shared principles or just shared panic? People always wonder, did these totally different groups actively coordinate? Like, was there some secret smoke-filled room where they plotted this opposition? The reality is usually just converging self-interest. You don't need a secret meeting. Independent networks of elites, who all share the same universities and worldview, simply recognized that an outsider threatened the customs protecting their status. It's captured perfectly in this one idea. Different motives can still defend the same arrangement. Think about it. A foreign adversary might oppose a leader over trade tariffs, while a media executive opposes them over cultural norms. Totally different motives, right? But their interests overlap perfectly to preserve the exact same pre-existing order. So, what was that order? Section 3, the old arrangement. Who actually benefited from the pre-Trump status quo? To really understand why that order was defended so fiercely, we have to look at the massive sociological divide of the decades prior. It's like 2 completely different worlds. On one side, you have the mobile class. Universities, finance, tech, they thrived on globalization and could easily just relocate or work remotely. And then, directly across from them, the rooted class. Factory towns tied to physical geography. As trade policy shifted, they lost stable jobs and endured serious community decline, while those mobile elites supported those exact same policies from a safe, insulated distance. As philosopher Cornel West argues in the source material, the system managed this massive disappointment by essentially telling ordinary citizens, hey, your suffering is just an unavoidable part of economic progress. The old arrangement socialized the pain among the working class, while the rewards, the wealth, and the influence remained highly private among the elites. Section 4, spiritual and moral tests. How do we separate the truth teller from the demagogue? Look, this kind of deep structural inequality completely sets the stage for a revolt. But how do we morally evaluate a leader who claims to step up for these forgotten people? Applying a theological lens here, the book of Luke warns that universal praise from respectable institutions is often the sign of a false prophet. But wait. Being hated by the establishment doesn't automatically make someone a righteous truth-teller either. They could be rejected for their courage, sure, but they could also just be rejected for being cruel. So how do we figure out which one it is? We can use theologian Reinhold Niebuhr's 5 rigorous spiritual tests. It's an incredible framework. Ask yourself, are they pursuing justice or just feeding their own appetite for conflict? Do they tell the truth even when it hurts their side? Do they accept personal sacrifice? Do they show restraint? Do they have the humility to admit mistakes? And most importantly, what kind of followers are they cultivating? And this is exactly why behavioral limits are absolutely crucial.
A true reformer who genuinely wants to fix a broken system has to respect boundaries and welcome dissent. They have to know the difference between someone just disagreeing with them and someone committing actual treason. You simply cannot demand accountability from corrupt institutions if you aren't willing to accept those exact same limits yourself.
Section 5. Judging the final fruit. The ultimate litmus test of leadership.
This right here is the synthesis of the entire debate. We have to look past the rhetoric and measure the tangible results. There is a vast difference between merely disrupting an old establishment and successfully rebuilding a new one. Shattering polite silence and exposing hypocrisy, that's a huge achievement. But disruption alone isn't the endgame. The ultimate goal has to be transitioning from a disruptor into a rebuilder. At the end of the day, measuring that fruit from the bottom up means asking the real questions. Are wages actually secure? Is housing affordable? Are local businesses thriving? What about family stability? Ultimately, the true measure of a populist movement isn't how mad the elites get. It's whether the day-to-day material conditions of the working class get better. Do the benefits reach the forgotten town, or do they just circle back to a new set of political insiders?
We've really only scratched the surface here. This explainer is based on a profoundly deep dialogue regarding class, faith, and our political structures, so I highly encourage you to read the full piece. Just visit https://imaginarytalks.com/can-you-judge-Donald-Trump-by-his-enemies. Seriously, take a few minutes to read the whole thing. You absolutely won't regret it.
I want to leave you with one final powerful question to think about. Are ordinary citizens less afraid of the future after he took their side? Because in the end, a leader's worth isn't measured by the power of his enemies or the volume of his promises. It's measured by the peace and security he brings to his people. That's the real test. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions, and we'll see you next time.